I'm excited. In today's video, we are going to be ripping out the power steering pump, putting in an electric power steering column. So you don't want to go anywhere. Stick around, roll that intro. Let's go. Welcome. So today we are going to be putting in the electric power steering into the Mustang. I have a video kind of going over a couple different options, and at the end of it I settled on electric power steering column, specifically one out of a Prius. You can get a couple different ones, but the Prius one is known to work really well. It's easy to find in the junkyard and it's relatively cheap. For 100 bucks I bought one straight from the wrecker. But we need to do a couple changes to the car to make it work. You can't just slap it in and expect everything to work. So let's take a look at some of the things that I have set out here that is going to be going into the car. So here is the column from the Prius. Got the controller. For controls, I went with Inductive AutoWorks, their Repower steering controller. So this one works with multiple different steering systems. So make sure that you do check what they work with before you go and buy a column, or they also work with pumps, they work with racks. So it's a very universal system, and I really like it because it can use multiple different inputs. So you can do a speed, you can do a switch, you can do a potentiometer, you can do CAN. There's all kinds of different inputs. So it's very, very versatile. It is a little pricey. I think it was a little over $200, but it will make this system work amazing, I believe, because I'll be able to set how much assist I want based on, I think I'll do it based on speed. So yeah, it's basically a requirement, in my opinion, to have a controller when doing one of these systems. Any kind of electric power steering system, get a controller. Then I have a column, or not a column, steering shafts for a Mustang. So hopefully I'll be able to adapt up something from this to work with this. It's all going to be kind of figuring things out on the fly, so we'll see how that goes. And then we got the manual steering rack for Mustang. So I went with a quick ratio one. So that should allow me to do a little bit better, less turning the wheel and more turning of the car. Since this is basically an autocross car, I want to have really good steering, and I wanted to go with the manual rack. So that will get rid of a little bit of the weight down low. I'm going to try to weigh everything that comes off the car and everything that goes onto the car, so we can try to figure out how much weight is actually being added or removed, and then kind of where the weight is being located. So you don't have to go to a manual rack. You can depower the power steering rack, but mine is already making kind of a clunky noise, so it had to be replaced anyway. So I thought it useful to go with the manual steering rack and get the quick ratio at the same time. If you are wanting to try to save some money, you can depower the rack. Look it up. There's probably some YouTube videos on it. As far as the removing the pump, so my plan for it, because I don't have an AC pump, I don't have a smog pump, all I have is power steering, the alternator, and a water pump, and then the crank. So what I'm going to do is remove this pump, obviously, change out this idler for one that's a ribbed, and hopefully the belt will just kind of come around, and basically this will act like the power steering one is the plan. So I'll have to get a shorter belt, obviously, but I kind of need to see if I can make this work and get it lined up. It's not exactly made for this car, as this is going to be a pretty custom deal, but I think it should work out pretty well, and I'll just need to figure out what belt length that I actually need to go with for that. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention that I do already have a removable steering wheel. So what I did, I bought a hub that is for the Prius. So that one will replace the Mustang hub that's on there, and then I'll be able to reuse this steering wheel just perfectly fine with the Prius one. But yeah, let's get everything removed out, and we can start fabbing up a bracket mount to hold in that column. I've ran into delays with mounting the column, having to design up brackets and wait for those. Ran into some delays with the wiring, having to order some larger cable and connectors and crimpers and all that stuff to go along with being able to route to run a power cable from the fuse box to the motor. So I'm gonna do the next easiest portion basically is getting all the old stuff removed. So power steering pump is removed out of the car. I'm going to get the rack pulled out so then I can get the manual rack put in. That's all going to be just bolt-in things. Hopefully no issues with that. So I'm going to get going on that while I wait for the parts for everything else. And then hopefully we can get everything together and have a working system. Now's the time to figure out the wiring. So this is the ECU for the Prius unit. This will mount up underneath the dash somewhere where it can reach the motor. The motor does plug into these two connectors on here. This one is the main battery power. So this one goes to positive with a fuse in it. Most likely a 60 amp is probably what we'll need to put in there. And then this goes to ground, which we'll find a ground lug up underneath of the dash to wire that to. Then these are our control wiring. So we got ignition power, there's a communication one, and then we got the CAN wiring. So that's all that's on here. That's all that we're really going to use. I don't think we're going to use the communication one, but we'll wire up the 12 volt ignition. So these ones can run failsafe, I've heard, where all you have to do is hook up this 12 volt ignition, which actually I think is this black wire, and it will work. But I'm going to use these CAN wires because we picked up this steering controller. So I'll need to get that wired in there. It has a whole bunch of wires because it comes with all kinds of options, but I've pulled out basically what I'm going to use. So everything tied up here, not going to use that. That's for other options and other features. But these ones I will use. So we have power, ground, speed, and CAN. So the speed I'll be hooking up to somewhere for either the wheel speeds, the individual wheel speeds, I'd choose one of those, or the OSS one off the transmission. So looking at the schematic for this car, there is a splice that comes off that goes to so it comes off of the transmission speed sensor, goes to the instrument cluster, which gives you the speedometer, but there's a splice that goes off to the speed control amplifier, so speed cruise control basically. So you can splice off of it, and then there's another splice that goes to the ECU. Unfortunately, I've stripped out a lot of the dash, and a lot of this wiring I actually removed, which I didn't need. Cruise control, didn't need that, so that was all ripped out of there. So I actually don't have this splice anymore. I've removed it, unfortunately, so I'd have to create my own new splice, which is easy to do, but that is one option, is to just pull off of the transmission speed sensor. But if you guys have been watching for a while, then you probably know that I used to have a traction control unit in here, an aftermarket one. It was mounted right up in here, which I have all the speed sensors ran to it. So it's easy for me to grab one of those speed sensors right up here. And there's power, there's ground, pretty much almost everything is there that I need to wire this guy up to make it work. And there are two factory bolt holes that line up perfectly with the mounting bolts in this guy already. So it's almost like it was made to be there, which is freaking awesome. So that will go right in there. We'll wire it up. And then the CAN wiring, we need to run to the ECU. The ignition one, will basically kind of tie those together and then tie that into the ignition source that I have going up here already. Ground's easy, so speed. So all I need to do is get those wires pulled out that I need, put some Deutsch pins on here, put in a Deutsch connector, and we are off to the races with that. That is super simple. Took a moment to kind of draw out a harness so I kind of knew what I wanted to make. So we got the repower over here. We'll go to a 4-pin over to basically get some things from the car, and then I'll have a drop that goes over to the ECU, and it will also be a 4-pin. So very crude, but it kind of gives me at least an idea of what I need to do. So I should be able to easily start pinning these and cutting these. I went on here as well and kind of put in what side is my plug, what side is my receptacle, so I know clearly which pins to put on and things like that. Ones that have the power directly on them, such as the car, will be my plug side, and then the receptacle, since it has open contacts, it will be the receptacle side. This also gives me an opportunity to test out my new crimpers from JR Ready. So these are ones for Deutsch pins, and it comes with multiple different sizes and things like that. All the control wiring is done. Time to power it on and follow the instructions. We'll put in our super secret Wi-Fi password, connect to it up on Wi-Fi, and we'll be able to start programming this thing. All right, so we're in the controller setup. So we'll select what kind of electric steering that we're using. So there's multiple different options in here. We're using the Prius one, and we will set it up for VSS map. And then there is a whole little map in here that we can go and set up how much pump percentage we want with what speed. So this thing is pretty sweet. It will take a little bit of tuning to really figure out what settings will work, but I'll just put some kind of default ones in there for the moment. No really idea where to start, but gotta start somewhere. Now that we got the control wiring done, it's time to do the high current power. And for that, we'll need to go to the front of the car. Electric power steering needs a lot of power and current. That's why they have such a large gauge on the ECU, which then goes to the motor. So we'll need to connect the power up to the battery or the fuse box and get that inside the car, where this will be mounted up underneath the dash. So I've bought some wire to be able to do that. The preferred option that I would really like to do is to use one of these empty ports in the fuse box to run a fuse from there into the cab. Unfortunately, I couldn't really find the terminals that need to go in here. So I actually have one empty spot that could take one of these large maxi fuses. So the fuse that you need is probably going to be a 60 amp. So it's quite large. So what I'm going to do is just add a maxi fuse with this little setup here. So we'll put on terminals, run this directly off of maybe this lug nut, not lug nut, but power lug on the side of the fuse box, run that into the cab with this wire in here. This is all 8-gauge wiring. And then for connecting this stuff up, because I just had to cut this off, I didn't have any way to get any connectors or anything like that, I have these connectors here, which is just a single single wire to go through. This is 8 to 10 gauge, but the lug on here and the terminals for these are quite large and require a special crimper to be able to crimp those down. So use that opportunity to buy a new tool. So this is a hydraulic crimping tool for something this large. So this will do perfectly what I need. So we'll be able to get nice, perfect crimps, something kind of OEM looking as much as we can, even though this will be sticking out here in the engine bay. Not a huge fan of that, but maybe we can try to hide it down in there somehow or something like that. But that is what we need to be able to put the electric power steering unit into the car. Main power feed is ran into the car. So as I said, running off the terminal screw on the fuse box, goes through this fuse in here, goes into the fender. We have a connector right there. It runs along and then into the cab right here. So this hole was already here, so I got a grommet for it. I don't quite remember what this hole might have been for. It might have been for another cable, or maybe it was just extra, don't know, but it's now serving a perfect purpose. So we got the cable run into the interior of the car. Now we just need to figure out where to put the ECU and get that all mounted up. So for mounting this column up underneath the dash, I was hoping to kind of use this bracket, which is the factory off of the Mustang steering column on there, but it just wasn't really putting the column in the right place no matter how I flip this around, and I would have to modify some of this central area anyways. So I decided to fabricate some new thing. So I went to Fusion 360 and kind of drew up a plate just off of hand measurements off of this guy, but it seems to line up pretty well, and I put a little bit of a rotation in there. So this is the plate that will mount to there, and then I have some tabs that will kind of come off to grab the pickup points that are on the factory dash there. So I'll need to kind of figure out the best placement for these. I left myself a little bit of room to kind of move the column forward and back, and then we'll need to get these welded up. And then for so there's 4 points on the dash, in case you didn't know. So this will be the rear one. Then this one we will probably cut up or something. I just made like a basic one to grab the forward points, and that will weld onto this guy in some location. But whether it goes on the top or the bottom, or if I need to cut this to go into the sides, I'll need to kind of get that all mounted in there and figured out. So at this point we can mount everything up, get that placement kind of right where I want it, where we'll be able to easily reach the wheel and then the pedals as well, being in the proper place in the seat range. Steering columns. So right in the middle is the factory SN95 one that I had in there. This one is the factory Prius, and then this is the Unisteer one that I got for the SN95 to go with the manual rack that is going into the car. So it is a cut to length one, so I've marked kind of where I'll need to cut it after getting it installed and measure up there. It's a special U-joint for the manual steer in there. I did finally find a U-joint that fits onto the Prius motor and then goes to the 3/4 inch Deeve that I have for this shaft. This is from Sweet Manufacturing, while all these other ones are straight from Unisteer. One thing that I don't quite like about this that I'll probably be changing in sometime in the future is, so this one is collapsible, so it's kind of adjustable down here, and then you can see that these actually collapsible. So if in the event of an accident, this steering shaft will collapse and won't push that steering wheel into you. Right now this is all very rigid. The Prius column does have a collapsible portion on it, so that is still good, but this was also kind of adjustable or collapsible in a way. So that is something that I want to change in the future, but for right now, to get it all installed in the car, this is what we're going with, all solid. So we are getting rid of the rag joint, which is going to be nice. Steering should feel way better on the car, be way more precise, even with the quick ratio manual steering on there now. So So let me get this cut and we'll get this installed into the car. And it's the last piece to basically get installed into the car and we'll be having steering. The steering rack is fully mounted up in there. I still need to figure out the turn stalk. I'll build maybe a bracket or something to kind of put it right there, but for right now, that is hopefully not needed to go do an autocross. But you can see the motor mounted up in there. I have plenty of room between my leg and the motor, so that is pretty perfect. I have the controller mounted right up in here, so that worked out to be a perfect place. So I was really limited by these wirings coming off of the motor for the sensor and the main power going to it. I was really limited on where I could place that, but all my wiring reaches. The main motor cable comes in, and I got a connector up in here, and then the wire from the controller perfectly mounts over to here. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. I had made the bracket to where I could rotate this, but then with my mounting that I'm doing right here, which I might change this up in the future, it's basically at this angle. I could rotate it up a little bit more. I did have to cut this bracketry a little bit here, so there were two bolt holes here for this lower cover, but I don't run that, so I had to cut those off to kind of clear the motor to be able to have it up this amount. But I do have still access to this bolt hole here, back here, and the steering shaft is you know, all mounted up back there. So really happy with how this turns out. And I put the short hub release on here, so I could get one that comes a little bit further if I need to move this any further out, but I tried to mount this much closer to the dash, and it gives Ashley a lot more room. Because she has to have the seat pretty much all the way forward to be able to reach the pedals, which I did actually move the pedals a little bit as well, but she has plenty of room to move her arms now, which is going to be a big plus. So let's take a look at the engine bay real quick, and then we can get this car on the ground and see how this thing actually feels. So got the pump removed. Here's the setup that I'm going with for the belt. So I just ran a wire around it to get the belt size. I ended up having to go through multiple different belts to find the perfect one. I believe this is a 60.4. I tried a 60.2, it was too small. A 60.5 was too long. I think a 60.3 would be perfect, but they don't make those ones, at least that I have found, because I am kind of close on the tensioner down there. But yeah, 60.5, the tensioner was touching. At 60.2, I couldn't get it wrapped around, so I'm at a 60.4, but it has plenty of tension. I'm not on the stop of the tensioner, so pretty happy with that whole setup. But with that, let's see how the steering actually feels. All right, I'm not sure how well this is actually going to translate onto video, but we'll see. So right now, power steering is off, so it's really difficult to turn the wheel. So we'll turn on power, and I think it takes a second. So right now it's still kind of hard, and now look at that. We have electric power steering. And this is just like, you know, sitting still, and we're able to turn these big tires, lots of camber, lots of caster, easily. We'll turn power back off, and now, yeah. This is awesome. I am freaking stoked right now. Sweet. So now we need to probably go drive it a little bit, figure out if the tuning works. Don't really have the time for that. So to timestamp this video, it is Sunday and I leave Thursday for Muscle on the Mountain. So I don't have any more freaking time to do anything, but I am pretty stoked with this. Everything is nice and sturdy. I do need still to set up the toe on the car, but man, I'm freaking stoked. The electric power steering is in the car. It's working. I still need to test it, obviously. We'll test it at the next events kind of coming up, get a feel for it, but I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to get it all figured out and that that it will work, feel good. So we now will have more power coming out of the engine since we're not dragging it down with that power steering pump. The weight is now shifted around, so I listed up all the weights as we're going through it, and guess which one is a lighter setup. So I totaled everything up. The stock setup came out to 38 pounds, 10.7 ounces. The electric power steering one came out to 34 pounds and 11.9 ounces. So we lost 4 pounds out of the car, which is pretty sweet. And we moved that weight around. So we moved a lot of the weight inside the cabin, so behind the front wheels, and then removed a lot of the weight, up high on the engine, down low on the cross member. So everything's basically been moved back into the cabin. So really, really stoked with that. The cost, this did turn out to be a little more expensive than I had thought, but a lot of the cost is in the rack and that steering shaft setup that came with it, pretty much half the cost. So those two things came out to over $500. So total into this, I'm just over $1,000. So another big chunk of that was the controller. So if you don't really want to use a controller, or if you want to do a different kind of setup, there are cheaper controllers out there. You can reduce a lot of cost there. The rack or the column itself from the junkyard with the ECU was $100. So that is really cost efficient, but there's a lot of fab time and figuring things out and labor that really went into this that is not probably properly shown in the video and maybe conveyed. It's probably taken me like 3 weekends and then some other time, a lot of figuring the bracketry out, because none of that is, off the shelf things. Those are all custom measuring, waiting for parts. The wiring is, figuring out things, measuring things, doing a lot of planning and things like that. But I'm super stoked with how it turned out. It is not a hacked together system. It is well thought out, well executed in the car. It's gonna be in there for the long haul, and I'm really stoked with how this project turned out. So thank you guys for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one, where we're gonna be driving the car, getting things figured out, and winning, hopefully. Later.